All right, Rob, I got a question for you.
Yeah, what's up?
Who is it that lives in a home? Is it a person or a corporation?
This is a trick question, but I'm going to go with a person.
Well, according to the current sitting president, that is the case. He wrote on Truth Social that people live in homes, not corporations, and I tend to agree with that. I think that is a very true, factual statement, and it made some headlines because it came part of a larger post announcing that he plans to ban large institutional investors from purchasing homes. And so I didn't know if you saw that those.
I did see those headlines. I've got a lot of feelings about those headlines.
I do too. Well, let's get into it. I'll read some of the post itself. Am immediately taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single family homes, and I will be calling on Congress to codify it. People live in homes, not corporations. So it's an announcement, and it's one that I know I saw that. I'm like, hey, I like it. I'm in agreement on
Yeah,
this.
I'm with you. My very first gut reaction was like, yeah, heck yeah, whatever we can do. We all know that first time home buyers and just buyers in general that are like the ones that are going to live in these houses. They're struggling. They're struggling to get into them, interest rates and home prices, like everything. So, if we can lessen the competition in the market for those first time home buyers, I'm all about it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where then though an announcement like this, the question is how consequential is it? So instantly we saw in the stock markets, certain stocks saw some drops of about 4 or 5%. Those large institutional investors that the announcement indicated he'd be trying to target and prohibit from purchasing more homes. But beyond that, those words don't at this point have any consequence unless it results in additional action. So it's going to be fun to watch.
It's an attempt to affect two markets. So let's define those two markets. The stock market and the housing market. They are not the same thing. And a statement and actual like regulation are also not the same thing. So this statement that was made, it moved the stock market. You're right. Ones that are investing in single family homes, they had some big changes once this was announced. It had no effect on the housing market yet, right? Because there's a lot of steps that got to go. We just have to even define the things that the man was talking about,
Correct.
right? Like it said institutional investors. Like, what is that? What is the definition of that? So while I love the statement and I don't mean to be overly critical of this statement because I'm behind it, I think that people should have a little bit of knowledge of what's going on in the real estate market. The stock market I don't deal with, so we're not going to talk about that past that it
Right.
changed the stock market and it did move that one. But in the housing market, like let's have you and me, let's have that conversation of defining this a little bit and inside of those definitions, what actually would occur and how it would help people, or maybe possibly not actually help people. It could
Right.
just be this statement made and everybody's supportive and great, and then it goes away. So let's have that conversation between us.
Because it's not the first time that this administration has done that. Just a couple months ago, they had made an announcement about 50-year mortgages, and that also sparked conversation. Many people came out giving their opinions on, is it a good policy? Is it a bad policy? In the end, it didn't actually pick up any traction to seem to come to fruition as a new policy. But it was it's what's called the trial balloon. You put something out there and see what floats. With this one, as opposed to the 50-year mortgage policy that I thought was less beneficial. This one, in theory, like the superficial glance at it, I think has a lot more merit to it, but it really does, as you said, all come down to the definitions and what does it mean if it were to actually be crafted into a bill that becomes law? And more importantly, then what are the loopholes? So a large institutional investor, okay, that how much of the market really is that?
Yeah. Yeah, and we've done a little bit of research to figure that out. So let's first do this. Let's define for you and I at least in this conversation what an institutional investor is. You cool with calling it 1,000, you own 1,000 homes or more. Like that's an institution. So that's a lot of real estate. So we're going to call it 1,000. I'm going to make my note. And I mean, to be clear here, I know that we've kind of said it, but this is not a bill. There is no congressional vote set for this. There's no regulatory language that exists in this. So the only market this is moving is the stock market, is not moving the housing market. Like, let's be frank on that one. And like Jordan just said, if none of those things happen, then the only market it mess with was the stock market and not housing. You cannot go out as a first-time home buyer tomorrow and say Trump said this, so I can buy this house now, right? And it's like, no, you're still going to deal with the same pressures that you've always dealt with.
With this policy that he's announced, they're saying that a lot of the details that we want to hone in on, they're going to be announced in 2 weeks. And typically, I mean, that's a very common strategy that they employ is they make the announcement, they get the good headlines, and then they say details to follow. And then typically things fizzle out and the details never really get hashed out or identified, and that the news cycle moves on to the next shiny object. But I would love to see it if we can take this opportunity to keep the spotlight on this issue because heck, it's 2026. It's an election year. And I really believe that there's a ton of bipartisan opportunity for both sides of our political spectrum to come together. We all agree, or at least we all should agree, that there is a housing problem in this country and first-time home ownership is becoming more and more difficult. So, okay, if this is the first trial balloon put out there to get the conversation going, I applaud that. And then let's have more. Let's have each candidate running for office put forth their best policies and just weigh in on this proposal and see then what can actually build a consensus, build a governing majority that can become a bill that passes and turns into law. I'm excited.
Yeah, yeah, and we have some numbers to prove it. Early 2025 numbers say that 30% of the homes purchased were by investors. So obviously, if 30% of the market's being bought by somebody and it's not their homestead, it's not where they're going to live, that is creating upward pressure on home prices. It's making it difficult for people to get into their home, their first time home. So, like, I applaud that there's a focus on this. Knowing more of the details, though, I struggle with. Let's get into some stuff here. Like, let's get into the weeds of this one.
Okay.
Institutional investors, by the definition we gave them of 1,000 homes or more, of that 30%, they're only like 2% of the market,
Yeah.
right? In 2016, we had issues with these large investors coming in and buying a ton of single family homes, and there was political pressure on them then to stop doing it. So knowing this, they kind of moved over. They're actually building supply. They're not buying existing single family homes at this point. They're literally building subdivisions that they're just renting out. So they're not taking away from the supply. They're actually adding to. Now, are they adding to the cost of construction? Are they adding to all of these things? Possibly. But if we're going to focus on the single family homes, the existing inventory, for the most part, they're actually building a lot of them
Right.
versus competing. They are competing, but not at a scale that you would think.
So the question becomes because if the ostensible purpose of the announcement is to identify that, hey, first-time homebuyers, they're at a disadvantage when competing to try to purchase that entry-level home, that home that is priced at the low end for their market. When they go to place a bid on it, they're up against investors, typically who are purchasing with all cash. And from the seller standpoint, that all cash investor offer has a leg up over that first time home buyer. And so, yes, a policy that is in theory meant to be like, hey, we're going to prevent you from having to go up against that investor. Well, if we're defining it as large institutional investors, that's not going to get that outcome. Though you're still going to be up against that small mom and pop investor who's looking to, add to their another home to their portfolio of, go from 5 to 6 or, 15 to 16. But it's like, so this announcement doesn't actually benefit the first time home buyer in the situation that, we see most often. And so then, okay, are there other policies or can we take this announcement and try to adjust the details to actually then become consequential where it's not just affecting the large institutional investors, but maybe also impacting those small and pop mom and pops in a way that levels the playing field. Or I'm the type that I want to see the first time home buyers get a boost and a leg up in policy, the first time homebuyer credits that came after the 2008 crash. I saw many of my clients benefit from that. And I think that those are the policies that typically get the outcome that we're going for, where you see the individual Americans benefiting directly from the policy rather than trying to put a thumb on the scale of the marketplace in a way that too often has loopholes that ends up making it inconsequential.
Yeah, and I agree. And I actually think that possibly, and again, this is just an open dialogue here, doing both. Put a thumb on the scale. Like, hey, you know what? Institutional investors, you can't play this game anymore. We're out, you're out. Okay? And then still also do those policies that help those first time home buyers. Even though it was only 2% of the 2025 market that we can see now, it's still 2%. It's still a small percentage. It's 2 out of 100 homes, right? 1 out of 50 that you did make it a little bit easier for somebody to purchase a house because you put your thumb on the scale a little bit. So I'm all for it. I think, and I love that we're having this conversation, that we're talking about 30% of the market being bought up by investors because of this social media post.
And when you're discussing the percentages, I actually think to the that's looking at the entire market. I personally think when trying to figure out first time home ownership and how to improve that, then you've got to narrow it down to the homes that are in the entry level market. And so there, the investors are taking up a much bigger slice
A much bigger size.
because, yeah, I mean, when it's the high end homes, the investors aren't typically involved in that because they're not going to be renting those out. So they have a much smaller slice of the high end market, but that means overall their slice of the entry level market is more significant.
That's a perfect point. I mean, I can actually dive into some personal experiences here if we want to talk about it. There's a subdivision that I invest in, and I know a lot of investors in, and the homes typically have been between um, 100 and $200,000, which is a 3 bedroom, 1 baths, 3 bedroom, 2 baths with a basement situations, which is right where people, first time home buyers, need to be in, particularly with interest rates where they are right now. And you're right, that entire subdivision is, anytime a house comes up for sale and it's in any sort of good shape, it's investors buying it. And they're doing two things. One, they're driving up the market price, but there's an effect that's happening too, particularly in this subdivision. And I can speak about it because I do so much in it, is that government programs like Section 8 that help people with housing set a number they're willing to pay for like a 3 bedroom home. And then it goes up for a 4 bedroom home. Like, as that number's been climbing, it's for a 3 bedroom home in the county, right?
Right. Yeah.
So if you buy that house for 120 or 300,000,
Yeah.
you're getting that same thing if you're going to be renting to those types of government programs. So why not buy the $120,000 house and rent it to them? You're going to obviously make a much larger margin. So you're right. Investors are doing that. And because some of those rents are set and capped, they're buying those cheaper homes up, gobbling them up, and making larger returns on their investment because of those situations. And I know for a fact that that subdivision it's not 2, 3, 4% of it is renters. Our first time home buyers or single families, it is solid 30, 40% of that entire subdivision is gobbled up by investors
Yeah.
and driving the price up
Yeah.
and keeping rents high because of these other situations.
Well, yeah. And so if the most consequential thing that comes from the president's post yesterday is that it actually puts a spotlight on this issue for this election year to where these conversations really start to take off and the candidates running for office to try to represent us and turn things into law, if they start to realize, hey, this is what the people care about, this is an issue in which government can play a role to make our lives better and help these people who are very deserving of help. When the first time average age home buyer is the same age as you and I, where half the people that purchased a home and became a first time home buyer last year, half of them are older than us, half of them are younger than us, half of them are older than us. That is mind blowing in my view, as somebody who's been doing real estate for 20 years. And so it's like, yes, the first time home buyers, they need help. Government is the entity that can do that. And so let's have that be the conversation. Let's not allow this to be in like one of those other shiny objects that makes some headlines and then fades into the white noise. Let's keep a focus on it. And 2 weeks from now, when he says that they're going to be releasing details at a speech at Davos, let's do a follow up. Let's actually discuss that. So then we can make sure that with our small platform, more people are paying attention and then pressuring our elected officials to do something beneficial for the country.
Amen. And I like it. I'm all for this. I'd love to see it get cleaned up and have some definitions and all of that. But like, yeah, I think this is a step in the right direction. I love that it's sparking these conversations that are happening. And I hope that the people are paying attention and not just reading it, but actually diving into like, here's the facts, here's what this could cause. Like moving forward, we make real change. I don't want to see, my fear is that we do all this, we have these conversations and we have a 1-2% change. Let's have a legitimate bipartisan agreement to like fix this problem.
Yeah, because then we can benefit those that live in homes, which, as was established, are people and not corporations.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I love it. I love that you and I actually agree on this statement made by the president. And I'm excited to see what comes out of this in the next couple of weeks and where we go. We should do a follow up on this. So, if you want to hear more about this in a couple of weeks, once there's more information that comes out, Jordan and I will meet again. We'll discuss it. And I hope that you'll come back and check us out then.
Yeah,
All right. Jordan, it's great. It's
fantastic.
always awesome to talk to you, man.
Yeah, it's a date. We'll do it
All
again.
right, bro.